Hey everyone, William Diaz here with Rebel News in Ottawa, currently covering the Emergencies Act inquiry, which is taking place from October 13th to November 25th, since in February Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Measures Act on peaceful, law-abiding protesters who are protesting the federal COVID-19 mandates. Today, I bring you an interview I did with Jim Karahalios, leader and co-founder of the New Blue Party of Ontario, as he was representing Benjamin Dichter during his testimony. Dichter testified in front of the Public Order Emergency Commission, as he was originally, from my understanding, one of those who organized the Freedom Convoy at its genesis. Karahalios studied law at the University of Ottawa prior to entering politics, and spoke to us about why he decided to represent Dichter during the inquiry, what his views are on the Freedom Corps, which basically is Karahalios, Chris Barber, Tom Razzo, notably. He also touched on Dichter's views of his relationship with Tom Razzo and a lot more. Watch how our interview unfolded. What were your general impressions from the testimony today and the cross-examination?
It was expected what we were going to see from Mr. Dichter. He was in an unfortunate situation of being surrounded. He previously thought he had standing. Convoy Corporation, as you heard, kind of led him on, telling that he was going to have standing, and then he found out he didn't have standing, and he applied to get standing, which would have given them the right to cross-examine others. It was dismissed. He applied to have his own lawyer lead the testimony. That got dismissed. So he's kind of really surrounded, like most of the other witnesses have parties that are in standing that can back up the witness, right?
Yeah.
And so he had a particular tough time because every party asking him questions, they were all trying to get at him, right? So very difficult position he was put in today, and I think he did well. It was very unfortunate yesterday listening to Mr. Wilson's testimony, and as you heard Mr. Dichter say today that, he heard a rumor that they were going to try to throw him under the bus, and that's what they were doing, and the facts were made up to try to make it look that way. But we were able to point to evidence that discounted everything Mr. Wilson said yesterday.
Why do you think it is that Dichter didn't have standing, unlike everyone else?
Because at the time when it was due in June, he was under the impression that they were all going to have standing together, the directors of the corporation, and his name was left off the application by the Freedom Corporation, and he only found out about it by August. And so when he tried to apply for standing with Chris Guerra together from Adopt a Trucker, the commission dismissed it. And the convoy organizers and their lawyers really are not representing the original directors, because if you look at the standing list, the majority of the 7 original directors are not listed there. So we don't really know who they're speaking for, but they're not speaking for the original directors.
And you said that Keith Wilson's testimony yesterday was unfortunate. That's what you just said. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, it was terrible. He used the word sabotage with regards to Ben. He accused Ben, or he said that he didn't know what Ben had done with the money that was raised in the Hong Kong Coddle Bitcoin campaign. And Keith Wilson was the lawyer for Ben in the class action at the time. And he knows full well that all of that Bitcoin money is now being held by the court. I shouldn't say money. Bitcoin assets are being held by the court in an escrow. And Ben cooperated with that. But yesterday he made up some facts saying, I don't know what happened to the Bitcoin assets. It's very unfortunate. I don't think anyone, when they hire a lawyer, they expect to see the lawyer not know the facts of the case and throw their former client under the bus.
I see. What do you think is the reason why some people left Ben out of the decision-making process, withheld information from him throughout the convoy?
I think that they were all left out of it. I think the evidence that was shown today was that you had Dean French, first Chief of Staff for Doug Ford, working with Tom Razzo, not an original director, a friend of Randy Hilliers, and Keith Wilson, and they went off and they tried to do their own thing. And the board wasn't at that meeting. There's no signature on whatever deal letter was there. And there were 4 people in communications, and none of them were briefed. So it's very clear to me that they weren't operating on behalf of the board of directors of the Freedom Corporation. They had other interests in play.
I see. One last thing, you're the leader of the New Blue Party. I know that you went to law school prior to that. What's the reason why you're the person representing Ben Dichter today, instead of someone else, for instance?
I think I'm the best lawyer for it. I know the facts very, very well. And I know what it's like to be surrounded by a bunch of parties. And Ben reached out. He needed help. He was supportive. And I don't like to see people getting left behind at the end of the day, getting scapegoated, thrown under the bus. It's very difficult for people in this situation to find a lawyer. I mean, most lawyers, are not going to be comfortable representing someone that was involved in the protest. And on top of that, most lawyers won't know the facts. And so he reached out and he needed help, and I agreed to come here today to help him out. And I'm representing him on the class action as well with Mr. Chris Guerra, who's the started up the Adopt a Trucker campaign.
And what did you hope to see come out of his testimony today?
The truth. That's all we can hope that comes out, is the truth. And he had nothing to hide. He pointed to documents. We were able to file new evidence. It's unfortunate that he found out after the fact that he wasn't being represented by the lawyers of the Freedom Corporation at the inquiry or the class action anymore, because if he had standing, it would have given us the opportunity to cross-examine the others. Both the government of Canada, cross-examine Keith Wilson, cross-examine many others. But he wasn't given that opportunity, so we did the best we could in the limited time we had to get the truth out for a witness who obviously put in a lot of time, had a broken ankle, a car crash, didn't get anything out of it, and is getting thrown under the bus by Doug Ford's buddy Dean French, by Keith Wilson, who endorsed Jason Kenney to be the Premier of Alberta. We all know how that turned out. And by Tom Marazzo, who's friends with Randy Hillier. And I think you followed very closely all the work that Randy Hillier did in Ontario to undermine the New Blue Party. So these guys have ulterior political agendas, and they like piling on people like Ben Dichter and others, and they like to corner people in defenseless situations, the way they teamed up on my wife when she was in the legislature and never gave her any support, never gave her any backup. And, we got the JCCF, and the head of the JCCF, chairman of the board, is Tanya Granick-Allen's husband, and not a supporter of the New Blue Party. So what their motivations are, it was pretty obvious. When you see that line in the email from Keith Wilson saying Trudeau is going to be pissed, he's got other interests. He's trying to pin all the mandates on Justin Trudeau. Dean French helping his friend Doug Ford, so everyone forgets that a lot of the mandates were against Doug Ford. And they're driven by politics. And today we had to cram as much as we could in 3 hours to get the truth out so that they couldn't walk away out of this throwing Ben under the bus.
And how do you think the whole inquiry is going? Last question. How do you think the whole inquiry, do you think we're seeing a justification for the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
Of course not. It's unfortunate the way the inquiry is going, because I think there's close to 20 parties, right, that have standing. And you really only have one party that's representing the Convoy Corporation. And Chris Guerra's not part of that, who started up Adopt a Trucker. Ben Dichter, who you heard today was the spokesperson of the corporation, he's not part of it. Chad Eros, who Keith Wilson threw under the bus yesterday, was the treasurer. He's not part of it. And the inquiry's only given one position of standing to the protesters, right? So they want it both ways. They want to say in the inquiry there was all these different groups and it was out of control. But then when it comes to giving them a seat at the table, they're only giving one view, and that's the view of Keith Wilson and Tamara Leach, who's under a lot of pressure. It would have been nice to see 2 or 3 other parties given standing. We did everything we could to balance the scales here, to get the other narrative out, the story of Chris Guerra, the story of Ben Dichter. We applied for standing late when both those individuals found out they weren't going to be included in the decision-making. We applied to have Ben's evidence led by me. Both of those things were dismissed. I'm grateful that the commissioner gave me extra time today to get to the bottom of some stuff, but we only had 3 hours, and this inquiry is going to focus most of its time on the government players and only a limited time for those who were there on the ground in the beginning, the first 7 days, before they got pushed aside by others that had political objectives.
This version of event is quite different from what Tom Marazzo and Keith Wilson recalled during their testimony. While convoy lawyer Brendan Miller cross-examined Ben Dichter, everyone could clearly see the tension. The inquiry It will be continuing for nearly 3 more weeks. Dichter and his counsel, Karahalios, were not given standing by the commission, which means they will not be allowed to cross-examine any other witnesses who will be appearing on the stand. Thank you for watching. This was William Diaz, here with Rebel News. If you want to help us fund our coverage, our independent coverage of the Emergencies Act inquiry here in Ottawa, that is taking place for nearly 6 weeks, please head on to truckercommission.com.